Welcome back to the Midweek Bible Study. We are in Luke chapter 6, starting at verse 40. I'm aware that looks like it's in the middle of a paragraph. Why would we have stopped in the middle of a paragraph? Well, two reasons. One, we were out of time, but the big reason there is that it wasn't written in paragraphs, chapters, or verses. In fact, it's really interesting to read the Bible with no chapter or verse designations. It flows a lot easier, reads less like a choppy rule book and a lot more like a great story that invites us to take part in the story. That commercial aside, let's take a look at Luke chapter 6 and verse 40. We're still in the Sermon on the Level Place, another version of the lesson that Jesus had given earlier on Mount Olives that is recorded for us in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7. Here we go. A student is not above his teacher, but everyone who is fully trained will be like his teacher. Well, this is a truism, and it's new. It's not part of the Matthew section, the Sermon on the Mount. What is Jesus saying? He's saying that you can tell who taught you because you are like them. It's another way of saying be careful who your teachers are, but also do not assume that they've taught you everything they know. It's a great double-sided aphorism, really. There were a lot of times in my life where I've listened to people teach, let's say a psychology class or a sermon or something like that, and I'm able to tell who their mentors were, who shaped them. You know, they're following over here, they're following Halley, or they're following Erickson, or on this side, they're following this school of preaching or this school of theology. And you're generally able to tell pretty fast who the teachers were. Even if you don't know the names, you know the particular tribe that they were in. In the psychology side, whether they were behaviorist or rational emotive therapist or psychoanalyst. On the sermon side, whether they came from the Southern Baptist tradition or from the Methodist tradition or from Churches of Christ, you can tell pretty sharp who the teachers were. Because it's inevitable. You tend to follow the teachers and you parrot some of the same lines and information and you build upon it. That's the way life works. But we need to always be aware that our teachers are human and they are fallible. We need to do what we do on Mondays here. Who told you? Who told you? And then who told them? And then who told them? Follow it back to its source to see if this is really as valid as you think it is. And I've done that with a whole lot of things in my life and found that a great many of them were not rooted in anything solid at all. And that required a shift in my behavior, in my faith, in my practice. It is life-changing. It's worldview changing. And I plan to keep asking those questions and keep digging. And if you have questions, maybe we haven't covered them on the Monday morning messages, you can send them in, patrick@oursafeharbor.com. And if I've covered it before, I'll send you a link, or one of the team will. And if I haven't covered it, I'll put it on the schedule. How's that? Can't say fairer than that. But the other is, your teachers haven't taught you everything. And there's a sense of humility there. There's a sense of not obligation, but rather respect and gratitude to the one who taught you. So he is speaking to a group, and we know this from Matthew more than here, but we also know it here, that there were Pharisees in the crowd, Sadducees in the crowd, scribes in the crowd. And he is calling them to have a little bit of humility, but also the humility to examine whether what they have been told is true. Then he moves on, because that's what this is. It's not the entire word-for-word sermon, neither is it in Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount, but rather high points that Matthew or Luke wanted to highlight. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye? Now we're back to the subject that we covered back in verse 37. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? Now, we look at this, we get some really good theological lessons out of it. You will need to understand that when Jesus said this was very funny, and people would have laughed. And they would have punched each other on the shoulder and said, "Did you hear that?" And they're going to go around and tell people this because this was very humorous. You see this person leaning, just trying to see, I think there's a little bit of dust in there, and the whole time they've got this 2x4 stuck in their eye. their own eye. And instead of taking care of their own problem, they're looking for this sawdust in the other. Brothers and sisters, that's the way the world works. People with planks in their eyes are going around trying to find fault with other people instead of taking care of their own planks. I have planks in my eyes. What about you? That's one of the reasons why when you've listened to our Safe Harbor lessons, whether they're Sunday, Monday, or Wednesday, or maybe you've had me come to your house church or to your brick and mortar church, you've never heard me condemn other people. You've never heard me judge and talk about those people, whoever those people might be. Never. Because, well, at least not in the last 20 years. Why? Because I'm too aware of the planks in my own eye. He goes on, how can you say to your brother, brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when you yourself fail to see the plank in your own eye? You hypocrites, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. When we talk about things like this, there's a knee-jerk reaction that a lot of Christians have, and that is, yes, but if somebody's sinning, it's my obligation to tell them. Maybe, if you have standing in their life that allows you to do so, and walking up to somebody in the supermarket and telling them that they're sinning, you have no standing there. It's one of my problems with street preachers. The street preachers often will, and you don't see them as often as you used to, but you did see them, and I have as well. And they are pointing out the sins of the people passing by. Perhaps the lady is too scantily dressed, or the man's wearing too many expensive articles of clothing, or his watch is gold, or whatever. And they'll rail against them. No, I'm sorry. You should be holding a mirror and naming your own sins first. And there's not a whole line around the block of people waiting to do that. Take care of your sins and then love them. And when they ask you why, then you can talk to them about Jesus. But you have to have the right standing to be able to pull that off. And just because you're a minister doesn't give you the standing. It is it's hard for people to accept, I understand. But I didn't make the rules. Jesus did. As soon as you are plank and sawdust free, feel free to go hunting. But until then, humility is a good idea. Further, no good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Now, this is actually linked to the teacher comment earlier. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. You follow on from the source and teaching, the source of your knowledge, the tree, the source of your nourishment, of your life. People do not pick figs from thorn bushes or grapes from briars. You have to know your source and you have to know your limitations. One of the difficulties that nursing home staff have, or really a lot of folk have, is that people will come in perhaps with a bag of medications that mama is taking and saying, does mama really need to take all these medications? It seems like this is too many medications. Well, the nursing home staff almost never can tell you unless they have a nurse practitioner, a physician's assistant, or a physician on staff. You can go to the pharmacist and they can tell you if there are any interactions or things you might want to bring up with your doctor. But I've had people bring it to me because they'll say, well, you know science. I don't know pharmacology, and I'm not a physician, and I won't practice medicine without a license by acting like I know what this stuff is. Stay in your lane. But there's also a warning here. If you were taught by a bunch of thistles, that's what you're going to produce. You need to watch, what am I producing? What's the fruit of my labor and my work? If you've been married 7 times and divorced 7 times, the problem might be you. I'm using a large number on purpose because mistakes happen sometimes twice in people's life, but there's an overall pattern. If the churches you've been to and you've been leading have split repeatedly, there might be an issue with you. What is the fruit of what you've done? I've had people attack me who have never produced a church, never grown a church, never done any of that. And I'm going, well, where's the fruit of your labor? Let me see what kind of tree you are. Now, That's not meant to be arrogant. That is meant to be evidentiary. Let me see who you are before I listen to what you say. It's rather important. The good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart. And by the way, the good is an oratorial trick. It is a way of really boom, boom, boom this into your head. But the good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart. Stored up. It's already there. They spent their life putting good in their heart, so good comes out of their heart. The evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. This is the big giver here. For out of the overflow of his heart, his mouth speaks. Now think about that. Were you raised with preachers that were yelling and angry? Maybe even literally banging the Bible, pointing, sweating, stomping around. Were you raised with that? Out of the overflow of the heart. That's what's in their heart. Now they might say, well, I'm just passionate. I'm sorry. It doesn't work that way. You cannot call it what it isn't. It sounds like an attack. It sounds like blame. It sounds like shame. Why is that in your heart? We should speak from the overflow of our heart. Well, we do speak from the overflow of our heart. So if your speech and the fruit that you're producing in your life is not indicative of a follower of Christ, then we need to store something else in your heart than what you've been storing. Well, then we come to the story, the parable of the wise man and the foolish man and the house. And we all, if you were Bible school people back in the day, you all learned the little motions about the wise man builds his house upon a rock. What you might not have known is that is tied into what we just heard about the tree and the fruit, and that's tied into what we just heard about the teachers. What is your foundation? Where are you basing all of this? So, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not what I say? I'll show you what he's like who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice. He's like a wise man building a house, who dug down deep and laid the foundation on rock. When a flood came, the torrent struck that house, but could not shake it because it was well built. But the one who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. The moment the torrent struck that house, it collapsed and its destruction was complete. The houses might have been exact duplicates in style, the way they were crafted, their beauty, made out of the same materials, put together in the same way. But it doesn't matter if the foundation is not secure. I used to live out in Colorado twice in my life. I've lived out there. I love the American West very much. There was a brand new subdivision west of Denver, a rather large one, and a lot of folk from the local congregation were moving out that direction, so the local congregation started another congregation out there. It was not long, within a year or two, that we began to hear of serious issues, not with the congregation, but with the subdivision. You see, Colorado is still geologically active. And in the house we lived in Colorado, they had to dig down, I forget how much it was now, 20 or 30 feet of pillars, to put pillars under our house to hold it so that when the ground shifted, it wouldn't crack our house to pieces. Well, you see what's coming. They had not really looked deep enough, and they had built it upon soil that was not stable. And so cracks began to appear in the foundation, and then in the outer wall, the inner wall, floors buckled because they didn't pay enough attention to the foundation. The houses themselves were amazing houses, beautiful houses, expensive houses. But it didn't matter because the foundation was broken. What is your foundation? What is your worldview? A recent survey of Gen Z and Gen Y people found that the number one priority for both men and women was career or financial independence. It varied, the women financial independence was number one, the men career was number one, very similar. Number two was the same as well, and that is having enough money to do what I want to do. all the way down to number 9 for women was have children, and number 10 was get married. And in men, getting married was all the way down to number 10. What happened? Well, since the 1960s at least, we have been tearing down the traditional family, attacking it, breaking it through a variety of ways, and not passing on our foundation to our children. And what's happening now in many places in the world is a really serious population crisis. Not the overpopulation that was warned about constantly when I was a boy, but no, it is the fading out and disappearing of populations. America is not at replacement rate on births. You have to have a certain number of births per death. We're not there. Europe is well behind the curve, having many more deaths than they are births. It is a real problem. And it was all caused because we didn't pass the foundation on to our kids. That getting married, having kids, building a stable home was super important. We didn't teach them that, so they didn't learn that. It's the way that happens. They don't teach that in school. In fact, they often teach against the traditional family by redefining family for whatever particular purpose the society has decided to do so at the time. And so I've seen many different permutations of the word family because the society keeps changing its mind, but they're not going back to daddy, mommy, and the kids. And because of that, we're in real trouble, because that's also going to disrupt any ability for people to retire. Whether you should retire at 65 or not is an argument I'm not going to get into. But you can't retire if there's no money, no pension, and no social safety net, because there aren't enough workers to pay for that, because you didn't have enough babies and you aborted so many babies. Japan is in such a serious crisis that they are trying to pay people to have babies, but they're not able to pay them enough to make people want to. And it's a real problem. And that's just one thing. Our churches, what are their foundations? Many of them are there as a franchise to serve the people who like that particular franchise. So when these people move into a new town and they see that sign, it's like seeing a McDonald's sign or a Jollibee sign if you're in most of the rest of the world. So you can say, I know what they serve there. I like what they serve. I'm going there. And a lot of churches are just like that. And many of their programs, most of their budget is based upon keeping the franchise people happy. Is that a good foundation? Is that where we should pour our money and our efforts? Or is it in producing people that look like Jesus? So these stories are about check your foundation. Who told you? Who told them? Who told them? Go back until you find the foundation for your faith, your worldview, your entire cultural eye. Figure out where that comes from and decide if it's valid. And if it isn't valid, go to work. Well, that sermon is over now. And here comes an event starting in chapter 7, verse 1. When Jesus had finished saying all of this in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. There a centurion's servant, whom his master valued highly, was sick and about to die. The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him, "This man deserves to have you do this, because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue." The verse ends there, but it shouldn't. The next phrase should be there. So Jesus went with them. And I love that. They come and they say something which is very arguable at best, is it not? Here's a Roman centurion. That's like a senior non-commissioned officer. Think of a gunnery sergeant, a master sergeant, something like that. That's a very rough estimation, but please understand that historical armies do not have strict equivalents across all ranks. So we're not able to say an E6 and everybody knows what we mean. It is not one of the officers, but it is someone who leads a good number of men. Usually 100 is more of an idea than an actuality. Your squad is generally not 100%. So, but it's around 100. That's why centurion. So he's a Roman, and he's part of the occupational force, but he has been very, very kind to the Jews and helped them build a synagogue. And so the Jews come and they say, this man deserves to have his servant healed. So Jesus went with him. He didn't say, how dare you presume? He deserves. You know what he deserves? This is what most preachers would say. He deserves hell because we're all sinners. That's what he deserves. And any crumbs he gets from the table of God, he should be. Jesus didn't respond like that at all, preachers. He didn't respond like that. He heard. He had the chance to be offended if he wished to be. Chose not to be. So he went. C.S. Lewis says that God meets us in the interruptions in our day. And I hate that, but it is true. I like to have my day planned out. I know what I'm going to do. I know when I'm going to do it. And then, boom, an interruption comes. And I think I've said this a few years ago. There was a time in Colorado where it just went after another. There was an interruption. Somebody needed food. Somebody needed clothing. Somebody needed help with this. And I had this whole thing planned. And I wrote, and because people know who I am, they understood that this was sarcasm. It was sardonic wit. I wrote, I plan to do church work all day today, but these poor people keep interrupting me. Everybody understood. I don't know, maybe somebody didn't and decided to unfriend me, and yet I survived. So that was all right. It is a fact that in the interruptions, God shows up often. And this is one of those. So Jesus went. He was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to him to say, Lord, don't trouble yourself. I do not deserve you to come under my roof. So this guy is not arrogant at all. By the way, the Jewish people weren't arrogant. Have you ever said to God that somebody deserves healing? I have. And meant it. Saying, God, this person does so much good. This person is touching so many people. We rely upon this person. Of all the people you could heal, this would be the person. Sometimes he does and sometimes he doesn't. And so I get into an argument with God about that. I don't know if you do, but I do. This man is a very humble man saying, no, I don't deserve to have this man under my roof. I'm not worthy of this. And he says in verse 7, that's why I did not consider myself worthy to come to you. In other words, I'm not even worthy to stand in front of you. But say the word, and my servant will be healed. And then he explains why he believes that. He says, for I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes. And that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. In other words, Jesus, I'm not worthy for you to come to my house. I'm not worthy to come and even look at you in the face. But I know that you have authority. I have authority over men. I know how authority works. And I know that you, wherever you are, can just say, it's done, and it's done. Jesus heard this. He was amazed at him. And turning to the crowd following him, he said, I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel. Then the men who had been sent returned to the house and found the servant well. Jesus took care of it. Never did make that visit. Turned around and left. He didn't need the glory. He didn't need to come in saying, well, how do you like that? Notice the healing? It was pretty good, wasn't it? He didn't do any of that. He was never about self-aggrandizement. He was never about elevating himself, but rather just doing good. Like the book of Acts says in the shortest biography of Jesus, he went about doing good. And then, soon afterward, Jesus went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went along with him. As he approached the town, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. All right, we have to stop there. We have to explain the situation. You lose a child, it is the greatest tragedy. It is the greatest of all tragedies. If you lose a child and you're a single parent, it's even harder. There's no one to lean on. There's no one to share the grief that close to you. You may have a larger community. You know what I mean? But in this society, they had rules. And that is that women did not own property like they can today. And it was not entirely true that they couldn't own anything. Here's the way it worked. By and large, the rule was this. You get married, ladies. You have children. If your husband dies, then you, whether you have children or not, have to go back and live with your father and wait to be married to somebody else if that opportunity comes. But if one of your children is a male, you can still stay in your house that your husband made or bought, or what you can still live there. You can still live on the property because he is there through the son. And I'm sorry, it's not a daughter. I didn't make these rules. So what happens if a widow lost a husband, now loses the son, her only son, the scripture says? She's homeless. If her father's dead or won't take her in, she's homeless. She has nothing. Is that cruel? Absolutely, it's cruel. Is it horrible? Yes, but it's the reality. Jesus sees what's happening here, and he knows the situation the woman is in. When the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, "Don't cry." Now, first of all, I don't know why he said that, because how do you not cry? But it does show that his heart was stricken. And I like that our God can have his heart broken and then take action on our behalf. And he did repeatedly. He went up and touched the coffin. Whoa, you're a rabbi. All right, let's do it even. You're a Jew. You're not allowed to touch a coffin. That makes you unclean. You have to go wash, and then wash your clothes, then present yourself to the priest and be declared clean again before you can go into the community. So you don't do that. And if you're a rabbi, there's no touching period. You don't touch. Jesus touched lepers. He touched women. And he touched the coffin. Jesus is not going to be held back by all the barriers that religion has put up. He came to do something different. He said, those carrying it stood still. He said, "Young man, I say to you," in other words, this is me talking. The universe pays attention. Oh, it's him. This is me talking. Get up. The dead man sat up and began to talk, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. Then he had a big party. The press came. He got in all the papers. No. He didn't want that. He just wanted to help out this woman. I believe the boy was fine where he was. He would be missed by many and tragic short life. No question about that. But I believe in an afterlife of joy. But he's brought back because of his mama. His mama needed that son because she loved him dearly, obviously, but also because it allowed her not to be homeless. It gave her back all the things that she'd accumulated during her marriage. The people were all filled with awe and praised God. A great prophet has appeared among us. They said, God has come to help his people. Emmanuel, God came near. This news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding country. We won't start the next passage because Jesus is about to meet his cousin, and we need to have more time to talk about that. They've met before, but this is a particular incident that we're going to take time to look at more thoroughly. Hope you've enjoyed being with us today. Thank you for being a part of our Safe Harbor Church. Thank you for those who pray for us, those who are able to give to us. It means a whole lot. Thank you. God bless you, and we'll see you